The invasion begins. The sky over Earth burned with fire. Admiral Vorik stood on the bridge of the Dominion's flagship, his reptilian eyes locked onto the blue planet below. He had invaded over 100 worlds, crushed civilizations, enslaved species. But Earth, it was supposed to be different. It was supposed to fight back. Yet, as 10,000 warships descended through the clouds, there was no resistance. No human warships. No planetary defenses. Not even a distress signal. The Dominion expected a battle. Instead, they found silence. Vorik frowned. Something felt wrong. On the surface, Commander Reth led the first wave of ground troops. His battalion marched through the streets of what had once been a great human city. The buildings stood tall and lifeless, as if waiting for something. "The humans have abandoned their own world," one of his officers said, scanning the empty streets. "Cowards." Reth wasn't so sure. He had studied humans before the invasion. They were a warrior species, known for their cunning and brutality. They fought against impossible odds and still found a way to win. And yet, Earth was empty. No soldiers, no civilians, no bodies. Something wasn't right. "Sir, look at this." One of the soldiers pointed at a wall, covered in human writing. Reth stepped closer and read the words painted in red. "You shouldn't have come." A chill ran through him. In orbit, Vorik's tactical officer approached, his claws tapping against the control panel. "Admiral, our scans show no signs of human forces. They have no fleets, no active defenses." Vorik didn't answer immediately. Something about this was too easy. The humans had technology, powerful enough to be noticed by the Dominion. Yet, they weren't using it. Had they fled? Or were they hiding, preparing for a trap? "Deploy full forces," he commanded. "I want every major city occupied. Find out where the humans went." Down below, thousands of Dominion soldiers spread across the planet, moving through cities, forests, and mountains. Still, they found nothing. The first disappearance. Trooper Jack moved carefully through a dark building, scanning for signs of life. The silence felt unnatural. He checked his comms. "Squad 3, report." No answer. "Squad 3, do you read?" Nothing. Jack frowned. His squad had been right behind him a few minutes ago. He turned around. They were gone. No footsteps. No sounds. Just gone. Then he saw it. On the wall, right where his squad had been standing, new words had appeared. "Now it's your turn." Jack's heart pounded. He lifted his plasma rifle. A shadow moved in the darkness. Jack fired, but the shadow vanished. A whisper brushed against his ear. Too slow. Then everything went black. Vorik's nightmare begins. A sudden alarm blared through the flagship. "Admiral." The tactical officer's voice was panicked. "We're losing contact with ground forces. Over 50,000 soldiers have gone dark in the last 5 minutes." Vorik's claws dug into the control panel. "How?" "We don't know, sir. There are no signs of battle. They're just disappearing." Vorik's blood ran cold. Earth wasn't an abandoned planet. It was something else. Something waiting for them. Something hunting them. And now, the hunt had begun. Admiral Vorik stood on the command bridge of the Dominion's flagship, his mind racing through the reports flashing across the holoscreens, each one more disturbing than the last. Entire battalions vanishing without a single distress signal, scout teams failing to report back, and the eerie, unchanging landscape of Earth showing no resistance, no visible enemy, just a quiet, watching presence that felt like it was waiting for something, something they had yet to understand, something far more terrifying than any planetary defense system they had ever encountered in all their years of conquest across the galaxy, because this was not a battle, this was not war, this was a slow, methodical erasure, an unseen force devouring them from the shadows without ever showing its face, and for the first time in his long career, Vorik felt something he had never known before. Fear. "Admiral," We have a situation. The tactical officer's voice, usually steady and confident, was strained, almost shaking, his scaled fingers gripping the console as his eyes flicked over data that should not be possible, numbers and readings that defied all logic, all military experience, all reason. Because no force in the universe should be capable of making 10,000 warships lose contact with their own ground troops simultaneously. No species should be able to silence an invasion force of millions without a single trace of combat. No civilization should have the ability to make entire armies vanish into thin air. Yet, that was exactly what was happening. And no one on the Dominion's fleet had any idea how or why. Vorik's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair as he watched the transmission feeds from various cities where his forces had landed, feeds that, just an hour ago, showed thousands of troops marching through human streets, scanning buildings, setting up occupation zones, securing key locations. But now, those same feeds were empty, the same streets now deserted, his soldiers nowhere to be seen, their signals still active but showing no movement, no responses to orders, no sound at all except for the hollow static of an open communication line, as if they had all simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind except for the eerie, unshaken stillness of a planet that should have fought back, but instead was absorbing them into some unknowable abyss, one soldier, one squad, one battalion at a time. And the realization of it all sent a cold, creeping dread slithering through Vorik's veins like venom. "Sir, our scouts." The last one just reported in before his signal was lost. The officer whispered, as if afraid to say the next words, as if speaking them aloud would somehow make them more real, more terrifying, more impossible. Vorik turned to face him, his voice sharper than steel. What did he say? The officer swallowed hard, his scaled throat clicking as he forced the words out. He said, "They are here." For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved, no one spoke, no one breathed, because that single phrase, that simple set of 3 words, carried with it the weight of something far beyond their understanding, something that had been lurking beneath their notice, waiting, watching, preparing, something that was now ready. And that meant whatever was happening to his forces, whatever was taking them, was not random, was not some unknown environmental hazard or planetary phenomenon, was not the result of some human-made weapon or defense system they had failed to detect. It was intentional. Something was taking them on purpose. Vorik clenched his fists, his mind racing through possibilities, through scenarios, through every potential countermeasure they could employ. But nothing made sense. Nothing explained how millions of soldiers could vanish without a trace, without a struggle, without so much as a single alarm being raised in real time before the loss of signal. Because this was not war, this was not an ambush, this was a message, and the message was clear. You do not belong here. Pull back all remaining forces, Vorik ordered, his voice a growl, his body tense with barely restrained fury. His instincts screaming that whatever mistake they had made by invading Earth had already begun spiraling into something far, far worse than just a failed conquest, because this wasn't just an enemy resisting occupation. This was a trap, a perfectly laid snare that they had walked into without even realizing it. And now, the only logical course of action was to retreat, to regroup, to figure out what in the name of the void they were dealing with before it was too late. "Sir," another officer interrupted, his voice high with panic, his claws skidding over the control panel. "We have new reports." A sick feeling settled in Vorik's gut. "How many more?" The officer didn't look up. "All of them." Silence fell over the bridge. Every ship, every battalion, every soldier still on Earth, gone. And then, the first distress signal came. A voice, weak, barely audible, filled the command deck speakers. They knew we were coming. Vorik's blood turned to ice. They were never gone. A flicker of movement appeared on the central holoscreen, a grainy, low-light camera feed from the surface, shaking wildly. flashing between images of broken streets, burning structures, and something else. Something moving between the buildings, something fast, something silent, something that should not be there. We were never the predators. The feed cut to static. Then the final words came through. They let us land, to make sure we couldn't leave. The transmission ended. And then, Earth's power grid came back online. Every city lit up at once. Every screen flickered on. And a single message, in perfect Dominion script, scrawled across every monitor, every warship display, every holographic feed. Your war is over. Vorik's heart pounded. Earth had never been defenseless. They had simply been waiting for the invasion to be complete, so they could begin their counterattack. The bridge of the Dominion flagship was filled with an unnatural silence. Every officer, every soldier, every crew member stood frozen, eyes locked onto the holoscreens displaying the last transmission from their ground forces. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting for something. Something inevitable, something inescapable. Admiral Vorik's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair, his muscles locked with tension. His mind raced through every strategic scenario, every military tactic he had studied in his long career, but none of them applied here. This was not war. This was something else. The distress call echoed in his head. They let us land, to make sure we couldn't leave. What did that mean? How could an entire planet, a world they had scouted for decades, pull off such a deception? A low beeping sound broke the silence. One of the officers, a nervous-looking technician, swallowed hard and hesitantly spoke. "Sir, we're detecting movement." Vorik snapped his head toward him. "From where?" The technician's fingers trembled as he tapped the control panel. The holoscreen zoomed in on the ground forces deployment zones, the empty cities, the silent streets. And then something moved. At first, it was subtle. Shadows shifting unnaturally between buildings, brief flickers of something fast, something that the Dominion scanners should have detected but didn't. Then, all at once, they stepped into the open. Humans. Not the weak, fragile creatures the Dominion had expected. Not the broken survivors of a failed resistance. No, these humans were armored. They moved with purpose, their weapons sleek, advanced, and eerily silent. They did not run. They did not flee. They marched, slowly, deliberately, toward the abandoned Dominion war machines, toward the empty deployment zones where entire battalions had vanished. One by one, the Dominion officers on the bridge began to understand. The humans hadn't been hiding. They had been waiting. Vorik's breath came out in a slow, measured exhale. His mind, for the first time in years, was blank. This wasn't a planetary invasion anymore. This wasn't war. This was a hunt, and the Dominion were the prey. A sudden, sharp alarm rang through the bridge. The Dominion fleet was under attack, but not from above, not from orbit, from the ground. The humans were firing up at them. Vorik barely had time to react before the first shockwave slammed into the ship. The entire command deck shook violently, red emergency lights flashing across the consoles. Officers scrambled to their stations, desperate to understand what was happening. "Sir," there. Another impact. Then another, and another. It made no sense. The humans had no planetary defenses left. Their orbital weapons had been destroyed before the invasion even began. Their cities had been silent. And yet, they were firing at the Dominion warships. Not with missiles. Not with cannons. With something else. Something that cut through energy shields like they weren't even there. Something that tore through hull plating as if it were paper. Something the Dominion had never seen before. Vorik turned toward his tactical officer. "What are they hitting us with?" The officer's scales were pale, his hands shaking as he stared at the data stream pouring into his console. I don't know, sir." His voice was barely above a whisper. We've never seen this kind of energy signature before. It's rewriting our own weapon systems. It's like... He stopped. Vorik's eyes narrowed. Like what? The officer turned to face him, his expression one of sheer disbelief. Like they've already studied us, like they knew we were coming. Silence. The realization hit like a physical blow. The humans had never been weak. They had never been defenseless. They had simply been playing a role. And now, the act was over. A sudden, high-pitched sound filled the air. A transmission. But not from the Dominion. It was coming from Earth. Vorik stared at the holoscreen as the image appeared. A human. A soldier clad in black armor, his face hidden behind a reflective visor. His voice was calm, steady, confident. "You thought this was an invasion," he said. The Dominion officers leaned forward, unable to look away. "You thought we didn't fight back because we were weak." The transmission zoomed out. Behind the soldier, thousands of armored humans stood in formation. Silent, waiting, prepared. "But the truth is, you never invaded us." A chilling pause. "We let you in." The bridge fell dead silent. And then, for the first time since the invasion began, Admiral Vorik understood. They were never meant to conquer Earth. Earth had conquered them. Aboard the Dominion flagship, the weight of realization settled like a suffocating fog. Admiral Vorik sat in stunned silence, staring at the holoscreen where the armored human had just spoken the chilling words. "We let you in." The transmission had ended, but its echo remained. Every officer on the bridge felt it. A deep primal fear. The Dominion had arrived with 10,000 warships, prepared to crush humanity in a single strike. Instead, they had walked into a trap. The fleet was under attack, not from an enemy in space, but from the very planet they had thought was helpless. The humans had let the Dominion land unchallenged. They had let the invasion force deploy freely. They had given the enemy the illusion of control. And now, they were closing the cage. "Status report." Vorik's voice cut through the tense silence. An officer scrambled to check the data streaming onto his console. His eyes widened. His hands trembled. "Sir, our energy shields are failing. The human weapons are disrupting them." Vorik narrowed his eyes. "How?" "We don't know. They're using something we've never seen before." Another impact shook the ship, then another. Each hit was stronger than the last. And then the holoscreens glitched. For a fraction of a second, the fleet's entire sensor network went dark. When the screens flickered back on, the Dominion officers gasped. The stars were gone. No, they were blocked by massive objects rising from the Earth's surface. Vorik's throat went dry as he recognized them. Warships. But not Dominion warships. Not the crude, outdated vessels the humans had once used in past conflicts. These ships were sleek, advanced, deadly, and they had been hidden, waiting beneath the planet's surface. They were never gone. They were waiting for this moment. "Impossible," one of the officers whispered. "How did we miss this?" How? Vorik already knew the answer. The humans had masked them. They had hidden their true fleet underground, beneath layers of artificial interference, beneath false signals that made their planet appear defenseless. They had let the Dominion believe they were weak. And now, the real battle was beginning. A new alarm rang out across the command deck. Another officer shouted, his voice breaking with panic. "Sir, the human ships, they're moving." Vorik's eyes snapped to the tactical display. The hidden fleet had begun to ascend. Hundreds, no, thousands of human warships were rising from the Earth, their engines burning bright as they pushed into space. The Dominion fleet had come expecting no resistance. Instead, they had been surrounded. And then, the human fleet opened fire. The first volley struck like a storm of light. Energy pulses, railgun slugs, plasma torpedoes, weapons the Dominion had never seen before. The flagship's shields collapsed instantly, the impact sending tremors through the entire vessel. Vorik gritted his teeth, returned fire. Now, the Dominion ships obeyed, unleashing a counterattack. Beams of searing plasma streaked toward the human fleet, missiles launched in every direction. But the humans were ready. Their ships moved faster, dodging and weaving through the chaos. Their armor absorbed the plasma that struck them. Their weapons punched through Dominion hulls, as if they were paper. This was not a war. This was a massacre. One by one, Dominion warships exploded, their wreckage drifting into the void. One by one, the invaders fell. And still, the humans pressed forward. Vorik's claws dug into his chair. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had led countless battles, conquered dozens of worlds, but never, not once, had he seen anything like this. This wasn't just a counterattack. This was punishment. And then the transmission returned. The same armored human stood on the screen, his reflective visor gleaming under the dim lights of his warship's bridge. "You thought Earth was weak," he said. The bridge fell silent. Every officer listened. "You thought we were defenseless, that we would fall like the others you've conquered." A cold pause. "But we were never weak." The human tilted his head slightly. "We were waiting." The screen cut to black. And in that moment, Admiral Vorik knew. The Dominion had already lost. Admiral Vorik's breathing was shallow. His claws gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that the metal began to bend under the pressure. The Dominion fleet was dying. The human warships moved like predators among the scattered remains of the invasion force, silent, precise, ruthless. The Dominion had come expecting to conquer a broken world. Instead, they had awakened something terrifying. "Admiral," a desperate voice cut through the chaos. One of the officers, his fur bristling in fear, pointed at the holoscreen. "We're getting distress signals from everywhere. They're picking us apart." Vorik's gaze snapped to the tactical display. The red markers representing Dominion ships were vanishing one by one. Entire battle groups were being erased in seconds. The flagship shook violently as another impact struck. Sparks rained from the ceiling. A nearby console exploded, sending a Dominion officer crashing to the ground, his body twitching from the surge of energy. Vorik's mind raced. They had to retreat. If they stayed, the humans would kill them all. "Order all ships to fall back," he snarled. "Regroup outside the system." But the officer at the communication station hesitated. His hands trembled over the controls. "Sir, we can't." Vorik's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean we can't?" The officer swallowed hard. His voice was barely a whisper. "The humans, they're blocking our escape routes." A terrible silence fell over the bridge. Vorik turned back to the main holoscreen. He saw it immediately. The human fleet had spread out, cutting off every possible retreat. There was nowhere to run. A cold realization settled in Vorik's chest. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were hunting them. Another explosion rocked the ship. Emergency alarms blared. Fires erupted along the walls. Shields failing. Someone screamed. "We've lost 3 more warships." The humans' air. Silence. Vorik turned toward the officer who had spoken, but the words had died in the alien's throat. His eyes were wide, locked on the main screen. Vorik followed his gaze, and his heart nearly stopped. The screen was filled with a single image. A massive warship, larger than anything the Dominion had ever seen, was approaching. Sleek, dark, covered in shifting armor. Its presence alone sent a chill through the bridge. But it was the emblem on its hull that made Vorik's stomach twist. A symbol the Dominion had not seen in centuries. 2 swords crossed behind a shield. The mark of Earth's true war machine. The mark of the Terran Dominion. Vorik's voice barely came out. That's impossible. The Terran Dominion was supposed to be dead. Extinct. A myth. And yet, here it was. The screen flickered. A new figure appeared. This human was different from the last one. He did not wear a helmet. His face was exposed, cold, expressionless, unforgiving. His uniform bore no medals, no ranks, only the insignia of Earth's forgotten empire. Vorik's mouth went dry. The human leaned forward, resting his arms on a metal table. His gaze was unshaken. "Admiral Vorik," the man said, his voice calm, composed, deadly. Vorik's breath caught in his throat. The human tilted his head slightly. "Did you really think we would let you leave?" Vorik opened his mouth, but the human cut him off. "We gave you a chance," he said. "You came to our world with 10,000 warships. You came for war." A pause. "So now, you get one." The screen cut to black. And then, hell truly began. The Dominion fleet was breaking apart. Explosions bloomed in space like dying stars. Dominion warships shattered under the relentless assault. Bodies, wreckage, and burning debris filled the void. The once mighty invasion force, 10,000 warships strong, was being systematically erased. Admiral Vorik watched in horror. It wasn't just a defeat. It was an execution. The humans fought with no hesitation, no mercy, no retreat. They moved like predators in the dark, striking from impossible angles, their ships accelerating at speeds Dominion vessels couldn't match, couldn't predict. And then, they boarded. Vorik's personal guards stood at the ready, their weapons trained on the sealed blast doors of the command deck. The ship's AI reported breaches on multiple levels. The humans were cutting through bulkheads, moving deck by deck, level by level. "Hold your positions," Vorik snarled, though fear coiled in his chest. Then, silence. The alarms cut out. The power flickered. The Dominion soldiers shifted uneasily. And then, the doors exploded inward. Out of the smoke, they came. Humans, not in shining armor, not in ceremonial uniforms, but in dark, silent battle gear. No symbols, no names, no expressions visible behind their visors. They moved without hesitation, without words, without fear. The first Dominion guard didn't even get to fire. A human's weapon, sleek, compact, terrifyingly efficient, sent a single energy round straight through his skull. Then, chaos. The Dominion soldiers opened fire, but the humans moved too fast, too precisely, too efficiently. They weren't fighting a battle. They were cleaning up. One by one, the Dominion warriors fell. Vorik stumbled backward, his claws grasping for his sidearm. He barely managed to lift it when a cold, metallic boot stomped down on his wrist. Vorik screamed as the bones cracked. His weapon clattered to the floor. The human standing over him said nothing. Instead, he reached up, slowly, and removed his helmet. Vorik froze. The human's face was calm, expressionless, unmoved by the slaughter. He knelt down, staring into Vorik's wide, panicked eyes. Then, finally, he spoke. "You invaded our world," the human said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a grave. "You thought we were weak." A pause. "You were wrong." Vorik felt his chest tighten, his vision blurred. His warriors were dead. His fleet was gone. The Dominion's greatest invasion force had been destroyed in mere hours. And now, he was the last. The human tilted his head. "You came to Earth with 10,000 warships." A slow exhale. "We let you land." The realization hit Vorik like a hammer. They had let the Dominion come. Let them land. Let them believe they had won. It had all been a trap. Vorik's breathing grew shallow. He tried to speak, but the words never came. The human stood up. "Your Dominion will remember today," he said. Another pause. "But not you." And then, darkness. The Dominion High Council sat in silence. The war was over. No, it had never even truly begun. Grand Chancellor Selkar, leader of the Dominion, stared at the holographic feed before him. The last transmission from Admiral Vorik's fleet. The footage was grainy, flickering, but the message it carried was unmistakable. The humans had let the invasion force land. They had let 10,000 warships descend onto Earth's surface. Then, they had erased them, not just destroyed, obliterated. There were no prisoners, no survivors. The transmission ended with a chilling image. Vorik, on his knees, a human standing over him. Then, static, the entire fleet wiped out in a single night. The Dominion's greatest military force, gone. Silence hung over the chamber. The High Counselors, once so proud, now shifted uncomfortably. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. It had crushed entire civilizations. But today, it had learned fear. A deep mechanical chime echoed through the chamber. A message. From Earth. Chancellor Selkar hesitated. His clawed fingers hovered over the control panel. What could they possibly say now? With a slow, shaky breath, he opened the transmission. The display changed, revealing a single human. A woman, calm, expressionless, dressed in a uniform that bore no rank, no insignia, only a single emblem, a blood-red earth surrounded by black. She spoke. Your invasion force is gone. No anger, no arrogance, just a statement of fact. 10,000 warships entered our system. None returned. A pause. This was your first and only warning. Zelkar's throat went dry. Only warning. We are not interested in war, the woman continued. But if you come again, we will not stop at your fleets. The air in the chamber grew cold. The woman leaned forward. The Dominion believes itself the strongest force in the galaxy. Her expression darkened. You are mistaken. Then, the screen went black. Zelkar sat frozen. The High Counselors said nothing. Because the truth was clear. They had made the greatest mistake in their history. And they would never make it again.